"We got married yesterday," she said like it was a joke, but the joke was on me. My hands shook so bad I could barely hold my coffee. My son stared out the window. He didn't even look at me. No invitation, no call, not even a text. And then, after cutting me out of the wedding, she blocked my number from his phone and threw a dinner party without me. I raised that boy alone after his father died, sewed through the night to put him through college. Now I'm the one getting erased, but I didn't spend a lifetime building books and raising a man just to be dismissed by a woman with a fake smile. She thinks she won. She doesn't know I keep records, meticulous ones, and I'm about to open the first page. You won't believe what I find. My name is Margaret Whitaker, and I'm 75 years old. Every morning I settle at my sewing machine while sunlight catches the dust motes dancing above my work table. My late husband Robert died when our son Daniel was just 6, leaving me to raise him alone while working nights as a seamstress. My friend Eleanor, who spent 40 years in banking, often joins me for afternoon tea, her sharp mind as keen as ever. Daniel's new wife, Melissa, with her chrome-bright smile that never warms her eyes, has taken to organizing my son's schedule, each suggestion feeling more like a command. I keep meticulous records of every transaction, a habit from decades of tracking sewing orders, though Melissa doesn't know that yet. The graduation photos on my mantle catch the light, and I wonder how faces so familiar can sometimes feel like strangers. But let me start from the beginning. Last Tuesday morning started like any other. I'd settled into my usual spot at Mason's Cafe, where the cinnamon rolls always came slightly burnt around the edges. Just the way I liked them. The porcelain cups had those tiny chips that come from decades of faithful service, and steam curled up from my coffee in lazy spirals. You know that feeling when everything seems normal, but there's a shadow waiting to fall? That's how it felt when Daniel and Melissa slid into the booth across from me. Something in their body language set off those old mother's instincts. Daniel kept fiddling with his phone, and Melissa. Well, Melissa had that cat who got the cream look she wore whenever she thought she'd outmaneuvered someone. "So," I said, trying to keep my tone light as I stirred another sugar into my coffee, "have you two finally settled on a wedding date?" It seemed like a perfectly innocent question. They'd been engaged for 6 months, and I'd been waiting patiently for details. Melissa's fingers danced over her phone screen before she looked up. At me. Her lips curved into what I can only describe as a victory smile. "Oh, we got married yesterday." The words hit me like a slap. My teacup clinked against its saucer, such a hollow, empty sound. I stared at Daniel, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he gazed out the window as if the parking lot had suddenly become fascinating. "Yesterday?" My voice sounded strange, even to my own ears. "I don't understand." Melissa slid what looked like a receipt across the table, pushing it toward the sugar caddy with the same careless flick you'd use to toss away a candy wrapper. "We wanted something intimate," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You understand, don't you, Margaret? Just a quick ceremony at the courthouse. No fuss, no drama." The way she said it, as if I was the type of mother who caused drama, made my throat tight. The cafe's bell chimed as someone walked in, and I swear I could feel every vibration of that sound in my bones. My coffee cup felt oddly weightless in my hands, like it might float away if I didn't hold on tight enough. I looked at Melissa again, caught the gleam in her eyes. She wasn't even trying to hide her satisfaction. This was her endgame, cutting me out of one of the most important moments of my son's life. And Daniel. Oh, Daniel. His shoulders were hunched forward in that same way they used to be when he was 10 and had broken something he shouldn't have touched. Some things never change, I suppose. My knees creaked as I stood up, age betraying me at the worst moment, and I fumbled in my purse for my wallet. The leather felt cool against my trembling fingers as I pulled out enough cash to cover my barely touched breakfast. I placed the money on the table, smoothing the bills with perhaps more care than necessary. Daniel finally spoke. "Mom," but I was already pushing my chair back. The sunlight streaming through the cafe windows seemed harsh now, almost cruel. As I turned to leave, the question burned in my throat. Had my son really chosen this, or had Melissa orchestrated every detail, right down to the timing of their announcement? I stepped outside into the glare of high noon, leaving that question hanging in the air between us, like the steam from my abandoned coffee. I walked home slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. The morning sun had climbed higher, warming the freshly cut hedges that lined Cedar Street. You know that sweet grass smell that hits you after someone's just trimmed their lawn? Usually it reminded me of summers watching Daniel practice baseball in the backyard. Today, it just made my stomach turn. Funny how your mind works when you're hurting. Mine kept circling back to all those late nights at the sewing machine, hemming prom dresses while other mothers slept. The constant whir of that old singer, my faithful midnight companion, had put food on our table and kept Daniel in decent clothes. I'd learned to stretch $1 until it screamed, paying bills just under the wire so he could have new cleats or that graphing calculator his algebra teacher insisted on. Have you ever noticed how a house feels different when you're carrying bad news? Mine seemed to grow larger and emptier with each step inside. The fridge hummed its same old tune, the one that had lulled me to sleep during countless midnight snacks. But now it sounded more like a lonely lullaby than comfortable white noise. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled out my phone and dialed Daniel's number. 1 ring, 2 rings. Then Melissa's voice, smooth as polished. Marble. "Hello, Margaret. I'd like to speak with Daniel, please." I tried to keep my voice steady, professional even. "Oh, he's in a meeting right now." Her tone was all sugar-coated efficiency. "But I'll make sure to pass along your message." Click. Just like that. I sank onto the couch, surrounded by the neat stacks of freshly folded towels I'd done that morning. Was it really only hours ago? Each pile sat perfectly aligned, corners matched, with the precision that had earned me a reputation as the neighborhood's most reliable seamstress. Photographs watched from their careful arrangements on the wall. Daniel's graduation, his first job promotion, the day he bought his house. All those moments we'd shared, now feeling somehow fraudulent. My fingers moved on their own, typing out a simple message. "I love you." The blue bubble showed those 3 dots, then read appeared beneath my words. Nothing more. Just silence stretching out like a shadow at sunset. The quiet gave me too much space to think, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a small ceremony. You don't orchestrate a secret wedding, then announce it over coffee, unless you're playing a longer game. This was about control, about reshaping Daniel's world with surgical precision, and I was the first tissue to be excised. I'd seen this pattern before in my sewing work. Sometimes a client would bring in a perfectly good dress, insisting it needed to be completely altered. It wasn't about the dress. It was about changing something just because they could. Melissa's intimate ceremony wasn't about intimacy at all. It was about power. The smart move would be to sleep on it, let this raw edge get smoothed down before I said anything more. When you're preparing to sew a difficult seam, you don't just dive in. You align your pins carefully, plan each stitch. Words needed the same careful handling. I set my phone face down on the coffee table, screen dark like a closed eye. The house creaked and settled around me, each familiar sound now an echo in too much space. From his portrait on the wall, Robert watched with those kind eyes that had always seen straight through pretense. The evening shadows were starting to creep across his frame, and I couldn't help wondering what else had been decided without my knowledge or consent. That question sat heavy in my chest. What else has been decided without me? It spread through the quiet house like smoke, seeping into every corner where memories lived. I woke to the kind of morning that makes you want to pull the covers back over your head, all gray skies and a chill that seeps right into your bones. My phone's screen showed a missed call from an unknown number, probably another robocaller trying to sell me extended warranties I didn't need. You know what's worse than bad news? Finding it out secondhand. Martha Peterson, my next-door neighbor for 20 years, caught me at the mailbox. She had that look people get when they're bursting to share something they think you already know. "The dinner party must have been lovely last night," she said, clutching her own stack of envelopes. "I saw all those cars parked outside Daniel's house." My hand froze on the mailbox door. "Dinner party?" Martha's smile wavered. "Oh, the little gathering Daniel and Melissa hosted? Just a tiny dinner, they said. I assumed you were there, of course." Of course. The words felt like pebbles in my mouth as I thanked her and hurried inside. Another celebration I hadn't known about, another moment stolen. I dialed Daniel's number, my fingers moving. On muscle memory built from thousands of calls over the years. Remember when he'd call every Sunday like clockwork? The phone would ring just as I was pulling cookies from the oven. He always had perfect timing that way. "Hello, Margaret." Melissa's voice again, smooth as expensive silk. "Is Daniel available?" I kept my tone light, casual. "He's actually stepping into a meeting." She paused, and I could practically hear her practiced smile. "You know how family rhythms change after marriage? We're still finding our new normal." New normal. As if 30 years of mother-son bonds could be rewritten like a shopping list. I waited an hour, then drove to their house. The clouds hung low and heavy, matching my mood as I parked in their driveway. I'd helped Daniel pick this house, remember? Spent weeks comparing neighborhoods, checking school districts even though he didn't have children. Yet, just being thorough, like I'd taught him. Melissa answered my knock, blocking the doorway with the kind of smile that belongs in toothpaste commercials. "Margaret, I'm so sorry, but we're in the middle of a conference call. We really can't do drop-ins right now." Drop-ins. Like I was some door-to-door salesman instead of Daniel's mother. Back home, the pieces started falling into place. Little things I might have missed if I hadn't spent decades keeping meticulous books for my sewing business. Daniel's mail notifications, the ones that used to come to my phone when I helped manage his accounts, now redirected to Melissa's app. A calendar invite for a neighborhood block party that somehow never reached me, though I'd been on the planning committee for 15 years. And there it was, on Facebook. A group photo from last night's dinner, everyone smiling, my usual spot at Daniel's. Left conspicuously empty. The circle was tightening. I could feel it like a thread pulled too taut across fabric, threatening to pucker everything it touched. My breath came short and quick as I paced my living room, where the rain outside had started tapping against the windows. Tomorrow I'd go to Daniel's office and wait in the lobby if I had to. He couldn't avoid me forever, and Melissa couldn't screen visitors in a public space. I needed to see his face, to understand if he even realized what was happening. But as I watched the rain trace patterns on the glass, a sharper fear took root. Was this systematic exclusion just the first step? What else might be coming? I woke before dawn the next morning, my hands steady as I packed Daniel's favorite oatmeal cookies into the blue tin he'd loved since childhood. Some battles need armor. Mine just happened to come with a hint of cinnamon and vanilla. The lobby of Daniel's office building hadn't changed much in the 8 years since he'd started working there. Same potted ferns, same abstract art that looked like someone had sneezed paint onto canvas. I settled into one of those stiff leather chairs that never quite got comfortable, no matter how you shifted. Know what 30 years of being a mother teaches you? Patience. I'd waited through midnight fevers, college, application seasons, and first heartbreaks. I could wait through a morning of back-to-back meetings. At 10:30, just like clockwork, Daniel emerged from the elevator for his coffee run. He stopped short when he saw me, his tie slightly crooked. Some habits never change, even after all these years. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I held up the cookie tin. "Thought we could use 5 minutes and something sweet. The courtyard's nice this time of day." He checked his phone, then his watch, then his phone again. "I have a client call in 5 minutes, Daniel. Please." The courtyard was one of those corporate attempts at nature, all squared-off hedges and geometric flower beds. We sat on a stone bench while a fountain trickled nearby, probably meant to drown out conversations just like this one. "I brought your favorite," I said, opening the tin. The smell of oatmeal and cinnamon drifted between us, a bridge to simpler times. Daniel took a cookie but didn't bite into it. "Mom, if this is about the wedding—" "It's about family," I said, "about trust and decisions that affect us all." He shifted on the bench, and I recognized Melissa's influence in how he squared his shoulders, lifted his chin. "Actually, I'm glad you're here. I've been meaning to tell you. I've simplified some things, streamlined them." My stomach tightened. Simplified what, exactly? The business accounts, mostly. You know how complicated approvals can get. He brushed cookie crumbs from his slacks. "I gifted Melissa power of attorney. She's got a real talent for organization, and it just makes everything smoother." Gifted. The word hit like a hammer striking steel. I'd spent enough years managing books to know what power of attorney meant: total control, complete access, decisions. Made without consultation. "Daniel," I kept my voice level, the way I used to when explaining why he couldn't have ice cream before dinner. "Have you considered having a neutral financial advisor review this arrangement? Someone who could—" "Mom." He used Melissa's tone now, that blend of patience and dismissal. "You're being dramatic. This is just practical business management." Practical would be maintaining independent oversight. Practical would be, Melissa has an MBA. He stood up, brushing invisible dirt from his pants. She knows what she's doing. Her organizational talent is exactly what the business needs right now. I watched my son, this man I'd raised alone, parroting phrases that weren't his. Each word widened the gap between us, turning 30 years of trust into a bridge burning at both ends. His phone buzzed. Melissa's name lit up the screen, right on cue. I could see. The clock now, clear as day. Access today meant control tomorrow. Every hour I stayed silent was another brick in a wall I might never break through. Daniel was already backing toward the door, one eye on his phone. "I've got to take this. We'll talk later, okay?" I clutched the cookie tin, still warm from the morning's baking. "When?" "Soon, I promise." But he was already turning away, his steps quick against the courtyard stones. I watched him go, my mind racing ahead like thread through fabric. How long before access became ownership? How long before everything we'd built together belonged to someone else? The cookie tin felt heavy in my lap, filled with memories that suddenly seemed as fragile as sugar and flour. That evening, my hands shook so badly I could barely dial Eleanor's number. Isn't it funny how some friendships span decades, yet feel as fresh as yesterday? Eleanor had opened my first savings account back when Daniel was still learning to walk. She'd helped me stretch every penny of Robert's life insurance, turning grief into a financial plan that put Daniel through college. "Come over," she said, no questions asked. "I'll put the kettle on." Eleanor's kitchen hadn't changed in 30 years. Same yellow curtains, same cookie jar shaped like a wise old owl. The peppermint tea came in cups I remembered from countless afternoon talks about interest rates and emergency funds. "Start from the beginning," Eleanor said, sliding honey across the table. Her silver hair caught the evening light, neat as a banker's ledger. I told her everything: the secret wedding, the blocked calls, and now the power of attorney. With each detail, Eleanor's expression grew more focused, like she was reviewing a suspicious transaction. "You're not being paranoid, Margaret," she said, tapping her spoon against the cup. "This fits a pattern I saw too often before retirement. But we need facts, not feelings. Hard evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "Public records, professional networks, social media trails." Eleanor reached for her reading glasses. "The story's in the numbers, Margaret. It always is. Remember how we tracked Daniel's college fund? Same principle. My shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. This was familiar territory, spreadsheets and documentation, not emotional manipulation. First step, Eleanor continued, we verify the power of attorney, then we look for patterns, previous addresses, business connections, financial histories. People leave paper trails, especially if they've done this before. I thought of my own ledgers, decades of careful bookkeeping from the sewing business. I still have all my old accounting books. Good. Organization is power. Eleanor pulled out her laptop. Give me 1 week. No confrontations, no accusations, just quiet fact-finding. I still have contacts in the banking world who owe me favors. Daniel won't listen anyway, I said, the afternoon's memory still fresh. Not yet. Then we'll let the numbers do the talking. Eleanor started typing. I'm making you a checklist. Start with public records, marriage licenses, property deeds, business registrations. Note everything, even if it seems small. The familiar click of keys reminded me of late nights balancing books, finding stories in columns of figures. Numbers don't lie, I thought. They don't play emotional games or redirect tough questions. Eleanor printed the checklist and slid it across the table. One step at a time, Margaret, just like we did with the college fund. I folded the paper carefully, tucking it into my purse next to the half-empty cookie tin. My old laptop might be slow, but it could still access public databases. And I had time. Too much of it lately, with all those canceled dinners and ignored calls. What if we find nothing? I asked. Eleanor's eyes met mine over her reading glasses. Then you'll know. But in 40 years of banking, I've never seen someone push for power of attorney this quickly, without a reason. I nodded, feeling steadier than I had in days. Having a plan, even a simple one, felt like finding solid ground after weeks of quicksand. Back home, I set the cookie tin in the kitchen and unfolded Eleanor's checklist. My laptop hummed to life, its screen casting a blue glow across the dining room table, where I'd once helped Daniel with his homework. Now it would help me understand what the numbers might confess about Melissa. Eleanor and I huddled over her dining room table the next morning, armed with fresh coffee and determination. You know that feeling when you're untangling a knot and suddenly you find the right thread to pull? That's how it started. Social media's where people get sloppy, Eleanor said, fingers flying across her keyboard. They forget old posts tell stories. I'd brought my reading glasses and a fresh notebook. The morning sun streamed through those yellow curtains, warming my shoulders as we dug deeper. Eleanor had already pulled up Melissa's LinkedIn profile, and I couldn't help but notice how often she'd changed cities. 3 relocations in 5 years, I muttered, jotting down dates. Always to bigger markets. Now watch this, Eleanor said, opening another tab. Remember that banking forum I mentioned? Look at these posts from 2019. A man named James had written about his tech startup's unexpected collapse. The details made my stomach clench. Joint account access, unexplained transfers, missing documentation. The dates lined up perfectly with Melissa's time in Seattle. Could be coincidence, I said, but Eleanor was already shaking her head. Here's another one. She pointed to a thread from 2021. Different man, Thomas, similar story, this time in Denver, right when Melissa worked there. Both cases mentioned unauthorized transfers and commingled funds. You ever notice how truth feels? It's like a key clicking into a lock, sharp, certain, final. That's how it felt as we pieced it together, one document at a time. Small claims court, Eleanor announced, pulling up public records. Both men filed. Look at the language. It's practically identical. My hands trembled as I started a fresh page in my notebook. We need copies. Already requesting them. Eleanor's printer hummed to life. My old colleague at the courthouse still remembers me. I thought of Daniel, of all those nights I'd stayed up late mending clothes to pay for his textbooks. Now, here I was, tracking his wife's financial history like some kind of amateur detective. But numbers don't lie. I'd learned that lesson decades ago, counting every penny twice. "We need to organize this," I said, reaching for my tote bag. I brought binders, tabs, highlighters. Eleanor smiled. Once a bookkeeper, always a bookkeeper. We worked through lunch, sorting everything into categories. Timeline went first. Every date, every move, every coincidence laid out in chronological order. Under parties, we listed names, connections, documented interactions. Exhibits held the hard evidence: court filings, forum posts, property records. "Look at the pattern," Eleanor said, tapping the timeline. She gets close, gains trust, then financial access. Within months, accounts drain, and she moves on. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. This wasn't some misunderstanding or personality clash. This was calculated, practiced, precise. I thought of Daniel's power of attorney, sitting in Melissa's hands like a loaded gun. "We need an executive summary," I said, pulling out fresh paper. "Just facts, no emotion, dates, documents, dollar amounts." Eleanor nodded. "Keep it neutral. Let the evidence speak for itself." I'd written hundreds of project summaries during my working years. This one had to be perfect, clear enough to break through denial, professional enough to demand attention. I wrote and rewrote each line, stripping away any hint of personal bias. The printer kept humming, spitting out page after page of supporting documents. Eleanor three-hole punched each one while I highlighted key passages in yellow. Here was Thomas describing joint account access in Denver. There was James detailing unexplained transfers in Seattle. "This is it," Eleanor said softly, holding up the finished binder. "Everything we found, everything we can prove." I stared at that black binder, so innocent-looking on the outside. Inside, it held proof that my son had married a financial predator. The question wasn't whether Melissa would try to drain his accounts. The question was when. But would proof be enough? Daniel had already brushed off my concerns as dramatic. Would documented evidence pierce that wall of denial he'd built around himself? The printer spit out one final page, my executive summary, clean and professional. As I added it to the front of the binder, I remembered how Daniel used to show me his report cards, eager for approval. Now I had a very different kind of report to show him, and everything hung on how he'd read it. The next morning, I met Eleanor in one of those glass-walled study rooms at the downtown library. You know the kind, just enough privacy for whispers, but public enough to keep everything above board. I'd brought coffee in a thermos, and Eleanor had her laptop ready. "We need to think strategically about delivery," Eleanor said, spreading out our documents. "Who sees this first matters as much as what they see." I nodded, remembering all those years of timing invoice submissions just right. "Daniel will dismiss it if it comes directly from me." "Exactly." Eleanor pulled up Daniel's company website. "His business partners have everything to lose if Melissa gains control. They'll have to take this seriously." The morning light filtered through the glass, catching dust motes as they danced. It reminded me of early mornings at my sewing table, when the sun would hit just right and illuminate every thread waiting to be woven into something purposeful. "How do we position it?" I asked, pulling out fresh notepaper. The library's heating system hummed softly in the background. "Professional courtesy," Eleanor said firmly. "We're not attacking. We're protecting the company's interests, and Daniel's, of course." I started drafting the email, choosing each word like I used to choose fabric. Testing. The weight, considering the durability. "I believe information has come to light that requires immediate review." Eleanor leaned over. "Good. Clinical, not emotional. Now mention the time frame. Would it be possible to schedule a 30-minute meeting to discuss matters affecting both the company and Daniel's financial security?" "Perfect," Eleanor nodded. "They'll recognize the urgency without feeling ambushed." We spent the next hour bookmarking every claim to its source document. Each allegation about Melissa's past had to link directly to court records, forum posts, or official filings. No gossip, no hearsay, just hard evidence with clear citations. "What about legal counsel?" I asked, remembering how Robert always said good business needs good lawyers. Eleanor pulled out a business card. "Sandra Chen. She specializes in financial protection cases, discreet, efficient, and she offers free initial consultations." I drafted a separate email to Sandra, keeping it brief, just the key points and an offer to provide full documentation upon request. "Should we attach the whole packet?" "No," Eleanor said. "Just the index for now. Let her request what she needs. Keeps it professional." We timed everything carefully. The email to Daniel's partners would go out at 8:15 a.m., early enough to catch them at their desks, late. Enough that they'd be settled in. The note to Sandra would follow at 9 Quintam, giving us time to field any immediate responses from the partners. "Now for the hard part," Eleanor said, pushing back from the table. "We wait." I stared at the 2 draft emails on my screen. One to Mr. Harrison and Mr. Chen, managing partners, and one to Sandra Chen, SK. Each one felt like a key turning in a lock, but would they open doors or seal them shut? The library had grown quieter, most morning patrons drifting away to lunch. Through the glass walls, I could see an elderly man reading a newspaper, turning pages with careful attention, just like I was about to turn a page in my own story. "What if they close ranks?" I asked, voicing the fear that had been sitting in my throat. Eleanor squeezed my hand. "Then we moved to Plan B. But first, let's give them a chance to do the right thing." I checked every attachment one final time, verified every email address, and scheduled both messages for tomorrow morning. 20 years of business correspondence had taught me to triple-check everything before hitting send. The cursor hovered over those draft emails, each one loaded with enough evidence to shatter Melissa's carefully constructed facade. Would the gatekeepers recognize the warning for what it was? Or would they slam their doors, leaving Daniel even more isolated behind Melissa's walls? I closed my laptop slowly, feeling the weight of tomorrow pressing against my shoulders. The library's clock ticked steadily onward, each second bringing us closer to 8:15 a.m. and whatever would follow. I woke before dawn that morning, my hands shaking as I made coffee. The kitchen clock's tick seemed louder than usual, each second drawing me closer to 8:15. You know that feeling when you're about to do something that can't be undone? That's where I was, watching steam rise from my cup like prayers. At 7:58, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped Daniel with his homework all those years ago. The morning sun caught the wood grain where lemon oil had soaked in deep. I'd polished this table every Sunday for 30 years, each stroke a meditation on keeping things clean and true. 8:02 a.m. I hit send. The email to the partners flew off into whatever digital space holds our fates these days. My breath caught as the message sent confirmation appeared. You ever notice how the biggest moments often feel the smallest when they're happening? At 8:07, Mr. Harrison's auto reply pinged, "Out of office until 2 p.m. Urgent matters will be addressed upon return." I sat there, hands folded like I was in church, waiting for what? A miracle? A disaster? The coffee went cold beside me, untouched. Then at noon, exactly noon, like she'd timed it, my phone lit up with Daniel's name. My heart did that funny skip it does when you know something's wrong, but you have to face it anyway. "Mom." His voice was stretched tight as a wire. "What are you doing?" "Daniel, Melissa explained everything. How could you try to sabotage us like this?" The word sabotage hit me like a slap. I pressed my free hand flat against the table to steady myself. "That's not what—" "Her past relationships? Really? You're digging through her past relationships?" My throat closed up. Remember when Daniel was 6 and fell off his bike? How he looked at me with such betrayal when I wouldn't let him ride without his helmet. This felt like that, but 1,000 times worse. The financial records show nothing. You're just... He made a sound between a sigh and a growl. You're just trying to control everything, like always. I nearly broke then. My finger hovered over the laptop, tempted to send a follow-up email to the partners retracting everything. Maybe if I apologized, blamed it on a misunderstanding. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Facts don't fear sunlight. Such a simple sentence, but it steadied me like a hand on my shoulder. Because she was right, truth doesn't need to hide. I'd seen the documents, traced the pattern, verified every claim. This wasn't about control, it was about protection. I forwarded the index to Sandra Chen, the lawyer Eleanor recommended. Then I sent a brief message to both partners confirming I had complete documentation, ready for review. Daniel, I said into the phone, keeping my voice level, I love you too much to stay silent. Don't. The word came out hard. Just don't. The line went dead. I turned off my phone's ringer and set it face down on the table. The house felt enormous suddenly, like it had swelled to hold all my fear. Had I just chosen between truth and my son? The thought made my hands shake so bad I had to grip the edge of the table. At 2:47 p.m., an email arrived from Mr. Harrison. Emergency review meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., conference room A. Please bring all documentation. I stared at those words until they blurred. 38 years of motherhood, and here I sat, about to walk into a room of strangers and lay out evidence that might drive my son even further away. The afternoon light slanted through my kitchen window, catching dust motes in its beam, and I wondered if this was how surgeons felt, knowing the cut would hurt but might also heal. The next morning, my ancient laptop hummed like an angry cat as I set up for the video call. You know that moment. Before a thunderstorm, when the air feels charged with electricity. That's how my little home office felt at 8:57 a.m. I'd laid everything out the night before. Documentation arranged in precise order, post-its marking key pages, timestamps highlighted in yellow. Eleanor had drilled me on staying calm, sticking to facts, letting the numbers tell their story. You're not accusing, she'd said. You're informing. At exactly 9, faces populated my screen like a Brady Bunch opening sequence. Mr. Harrison in what looked like a corner office, Ms. Rodriguez at her kitchen island, and 3 other partners I recognized from company photos. Daniel's square remained dark. Mrs. Whitaker, Mr. Harrison began, his voice carrying that careful neutrality lawyer's perfect. Thank you for joining us. We'll start with the timeline you provided. The screen filled with my meticulously crafted spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, court filings, all marching down in neat rows. My hands, folded in my lap, didn't shake at all. Funny how calm comes when you're standing on solid ground. These small claims cases, Ms. Rodriguez pointed to highlighted entries, both followed similar patterns? Yes. I kept my voice steady. Unauthorized transfers began within months of joint account creation. Both cases involved business accounts with limited oversight. More. Documents flicked by, bank statements, social media timestamps, address changes that tracked with each relationship's end. You could have heard a pin drop through the silence as the partners absorbed each piece. At 9:27, Daniel's square finally lit up. His face appeared, wan under his office lights. He opened his mouth to speak, but Mr. Harrison raised a hand. Daniel, please hold comments until we review Section 4. He scrolled to a particular highlight. This clause here mirrors language from the Peterson case in 2019. Same structure, same vulnerability. I watched my son's eyes fix on the screen. The color drained from his face as he saw the numbers. Identical patterns, just different victims. The truth has a way of landing like a stone in still water. You can't unsee the ripples. Given our fiduciary responsibilities, Ms. Rodriguez said, we're implementing immediate protective measures. All third-party account access is suspended pending legal review. Daniel, will need your signed revocation of the power of attorney by end of day. Daniel's jaw worked silently. I wanted to reach through the screen, to hold him like I did when he was small and hurting. But sometimes love means letting truth do its work. This is ridiculous, he finally managed. My mother's just... These aren't allegations, Daniel, Mr. Harrison cut in. These are documented facts. The pattern is clear, and our liability exposure is significant. Another document appeared, a formal notice of suspension. The corporate letterhead looked stark against the white background, like a judge's gavel rendered in pixels. Daniel's eyes met mine through the screen. In that moment, I saw the little boy who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms, seeking safety. But I also saw the man who needed to face this storm head-on. Without another word, he clicked off. His square went dark. I sat there, letting the partners wrap up with their formal language about next steps and documentation requirements. My teacup, long empty, had left a ring on my coaster, a perfect circle of consequence. Within 40 minutes of the call's end, formal minutes arrived in my inbox, copied to Sandra Chen and the full board. I was reading through them when my phone buzzed with a social media notification. There it was, a carefully filtered photo of Melissa, head tilted just so, expression worried but dignified. Below it, a paragraph about family challenges and controlling influences that painted me as a meddling mother unable to let go. I set the phone down next to my laptop. Through my window, I could see Mrs. Peterson next door hanging her laundry, sheets snapping in the spring breeze like flags of surrender. Except I wasn't surrendering. I was standing, straight-backed and clear-eyed, just like my mother taught me. Melissa's post already had 17 sympathetic comments. But numbers don't change because people wish they would, and truth doesn't fade just because someone filters their photos. I've always believed that truth moves like water, finding its own level, seeping into every crack. By noon, that's exactly what was happening. The first ripple came through Eleanor, who texted that 3 separate business forums had picked up discussions about financial irregularities at Daniel's firm. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd helped Daniel with his math homework years ago, and watched the notifications tick up on my phone. "Margaret, look at this," Eleanor's voice crackled through the speaker. Someone connected the Peterson case to the timeline. I pulled up the link she sent. There it was, a detailed analysis from a local business blogger connecting dates and dollar amounts. Below it, comments accumulated like autumn leaves. Same pattern in 2019. Check the Davidson settlement. Classic affinity fraud structure. The fountain in my garden burbled steadily outside my window, a counterpoint to the digital storm brewing on my screen. I remembered how Daniel used to love playing with water, making little dams and channels in the sandbox. Some lessons about flow and consequence take longer to learn than others. Sandra Chen, the lawyer Eleanor had recommended, emailed draft revocation papers with tracked changes. "Priority filing," she wrote. "Partners are expediting review." The document was beautiful in its precision, clause after clause dismantling the power of attorney, each reference footnoted and bulletproof. My phone buzzed again. A reporter from the Business Journal. How had they gotten my number? I let it go to voicemail. Eleanor had been clear. Let the facts speak. They're louder than any quote you could give. Through my lace curtains, I could see Mrs. Peterson hanging more laundry. Such a normal thing to do while reputations shifted like tectonic plates online. I made myself a cup of tea, chamomile, my mother's cure for worried nerves, and watched steam curl up from the cup. "Daniel's not answering," Eleanor reported after trying his office. "Partners say he's working remotely." I knew what that meant. My son was hiding, just like he used to duck behind the couch when he'd broken something as a child. But some broken things need facing to fix. Sandra's next email arrived with a signing window scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Witnesses arranged, she noted. Partner attendance. Confirmed. The machinery of corporate law was grinding forward, inevitable as sunrise. Melissa's carefully crafted posts began drowning under waves of comments asking uncomfortable questions. Each time she deleted one, 3 more appeared. Truth has a way of multiplying when you try to bury it. I stood up and walked to my windows, deliberately pulling the curtains wide. Sunlight flooded my living room, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Across the street, I saw Mrs. Johnson pretend not to watch while watering her petunias. Let her look. I had nothing to hide. My phone lit up with another text from Eleanor. Check your email. Partners just circulated an internal memo. The document was comprehensive. A timeline of Melissa's history laid out in sterile corporate language, each claim hyperlinked to source documents. The Peterson case, the Davidson accounts, the pattern of access, followed by reconciliation errors. All of it arranged like evidence on a detective's board, impossible to unsee once assembled. Confidential, internal use only, blazed across the top in red letters. But we all knew better. In the age of screenshots, nothing stays internal for long. I thought of Daniel, probably pacing in his home office right now, watching his carefully constructed world develop cracks. Part of me ached to call him, to offer comfort like I had through every childhood crisis. But sometimes, love means letting consequences teach their own lessons. Sandra's final email of the day was brief. Documents prepared. Witnesses confirmed. Tomorrow morning we nullify the power of attorney and file protective notices. Be ready at 8:45 a.m. I set my phone down and walked to my sewing room. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, highlighting the dust on my old Singer. Machine. How many late nights had I spent at this table, stitching hems and mending tiers to keep Daniel in good clothes. Some tiers, I realized, require different kinds of mending. The lawyer's timeline felt like a ticking clock. Would the annulment process move fast enough to protect what was left of Daniel's business reputation? Time would tell. For now, all I could do was keep my windows open and my spine straight. I heard more cars than usual driving slowly past my house. Let them look. Truth doesn't need hiding. I've always believed morning light has a way of clearing shadows, but some shadows live in the heart. The law office lobby smelled of leather and lemon polish. Funny how the important moments in life often happen in places that smell clean and expensive. I arrived 20 minutes early, my good wool blazer brushed free of lint, the one I'd worn to Daniel's college. Graduation. Through the glass doors, I could see him already seated in one of those deep leather chairs, head bowed over his phone. My steps faltered for just a moment. You never really stop being a mother, even when your child has disappointed you deeply. Sandra Chen's assistant ushered us into a conference room where morning sun painted stripes across the polished table. Daniel looked up as I settled into my chair, and my breath caught. His eyes were red-rimmed, like when he'd had chickenpox at 7 and couldn't stop rubbing them no matter how many times I'd said not to. The room filled quietly. Sandra, 2 witnesses from the firm, a notary with an official-looking stamp. Papers appeared like magic, sticky tabs marking signature lines. I remembered similar tabs on Daniel's college applications, though these carried much heavier weight. The revocation is straightforward, Sandra explained, her voice careful and precise. Once executed, we'll file notices with all relevant financial institutions and business vendors immediately. Daniel picked up the pen. His hand trembled slightly, another echo from childhood when he'd grip his pencil too tight while practicing cursive. His signature looked different now, more angular than I remembered from birthday cards and permission slips. I want the notices sent right away, he said, his voice rough like gravel in a tumbler. Every bank, every vendor, today. Sandra nodded, and her assistant began making notes. The silence stretched between us like a taut thread until Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom," he whispered, still staring at the signed papers. "I'm sorry. It was just easier to stay quiet, to not rock the boat." The words hung there, honest but incomplete, like when he'd break something as a boy and apologize for the mess, but not the carelessness that caused it. I smoothed my skirt, buying time to steady my voice. "Silence might be easier, Daniel, but it's not always right." I looked directly at him. "The company needs proper safeguards, real boundaries, professional verification procedures." He nodded, already pulling out his phone. I watched as he typed quickly, then turned the screen so I could see a screenshot of the signed revocation, being sent to his partner's group chat. 3 dots appeared almost immediately as they responded. Sandra's assistant returned with confirmation receipts. "All filings received and marked effective immediately," she reported. "Banks are processing the notices as we speak." Daniel stood, straightening his tie. "I'll come by this afternoon," he said softly. "Bring something, I don't know. Something to start making this right." I thought of all the making it right gifts over the years. Scraped knees kissed better, broken vases replaced with allowance money, teenage arguments smoothed over with careful words. But this fracture felt deeper, like a crack in foundation concrete that no amount of patching could truly hide. The sun had shifted, painting new stripes across the conference table. Daniel touched my shoulder briefly as he left, his footsteps fading down the hallway. I gathered my purse and nodded thanks to Sandra, who was already focused on her next appointment. Outside, the morning had warmed considerably. I walked slowly to my car, watching delivery trucks navigate the downtown traffic. By sunset, one of them would turn onto my street, carrying whatever gesture Daniel thought might begin to mend this breach. I sat in my car for a moment, letting the air conditioning chase away the heat. What token could possibly bridge this gap? What small thing could restart trust that had been so thoroughly broken? The dashboard clock blinked steadily as delivery trucks rumbled past, each one carrying someone else's attempts at making things right. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across my garden when the installer's truck pulled up. 2 men in crisp uniforms carefully wheeled a wrapped stone fountain down the ramp, while Daniel stood by, hands in his pockets, looking more like the uncertain boy who'd brought home his first C+ than a corporate executive. You know that feeling when something arrives exactly as you need it? Like finding your grandmother's recipe card right when you're craving her molasses cookies? That's how the timing felt. Perfect but painful, like pressing on a bruise that's starting to heal. "Where would you like it, ma'am?" one of the installers asked, clipboard ready. I pointed to the center of my small garden, where Robert and I had once planned to put a bird bath, but never quite got around to it. The men worked efficiently, unwrapping the fountain and positioning it just so. The stone was a soft gray, weathered-looking but new, with 3 tiers that would let the water cascade down in gentle steps. Daniel shifted his weight from foot to foot. The company that made it said the sound would be soothing, not too loud. I watched as the installers connected the pump and filled the base with water. When they flipped the switch, water began flowing, a perfect ribbon that caught the sunlight and broke into countless droplets before gathering in the pebble-lined bottom basin. The sound reminded me of summer creek beds and quiet afternoons. "It's done," Daniel said softly, not just meaning the fountain. "The annulment went through completely this morning, and the partners." He paused, swallowing hard. "They made sure everyone who needed to know about Melissa's history got the documentation. Her whole carefully built image, all those social media posts about financial empowerment and building together, it's all collapsed." I nodded, remembering Eleanor's words about sunlight and truth. Speaking of Eleanor, my phone buzzed with a text from her, just a simple heart emoji. No words needed. She'd done what true friends do: step in when needed, then step back just as gracefully. Some allies are like that. They don't need to linger to matter. The installers packed up their tools, leaving Daniel and me alone with the steady whisper of falling water. I reached out to touch the cool stone, feeling the slight vibration of the pump beneath my fingers. "Do you know what this is?" I asked, though not unkindly. "Beyond being a fountain?" Daniel shook his head. "It's a symbol," I said, the words coming naturally now. "Like the water, steady, constant, clear. It's about restored respect, about boundaries that work both ways, about flow that can be trusted because it's open, not hidden." He was quiet for a moment, watching the water catch the light. "I'd like to have dinner with you," he said finally. "Weekly, just us. No intermediaries, no secretaries managing calendars, just mother and son." Something in my chest loosened, like a knot finally working itself free. "I'd like that," I said. "We can start next Thursday?" "Thursday works," he agreed, already pulling out his phone to add it directly to his calendar. The sun was getting low now, turning the water to liquid gold as it fell. A light breeze carried the scent of my late-blooming roses, the ones Robert had planted decades ago that still faithfully returned each year. I thought about how peace, real peace, isn't about forgetting or even necessarily forgiving everything. It's about choosing to move forward with eyes wide open, knowing exactly where you stand. I watched my son check his phone one last time before slipping it back in his pocket. The fountain murmured steadily, a constant reminder that had me thinking of something Eleanor once said during our investigation. Never mistake silence for surrender. The water kept flowing, each droplet catching light before joining the larger pool below. Daniel squeezed my shoulder gently before heading to his car, leaving me alone with the new addition to my garden and the quiet knowledge that respect, once lost and hard won back, is twice as precious for the earning.